Hi, Allegra here, Beyond Your Wildest Dreams, here for my Thursday chat. And today's topic is Ultradian Rhythms. Well, it's about what's the ideal amount of time to focus, aka work on one thing, which we're asked to do a lot of in our modern world. And the answer to that is we're going to talk about something called Ultradian Rhythms, which is a part of chronobiology. Chronobiology is the part of biology that studies the effect of timed processes. Now, some of these processes are timed over a day, which I think we're most familiar with, circadian rhythms. But there's also processes that take longer than a day. These are called infradian rhythms, and some of those include menstrual cycles. And the term ultradian rhythms are rhythms that happen in a shorter time period than a day. So short ultradian, circadian is a day, beyond a day, infradian. And there are multiple processes that fit within both the ultradian and the infradian rhythms, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But before we get started, if you're joining me for the first time, welcome, welcome. I am Allegra, and I talk about all things brain science based as they relate to productivity and time management and life design. And I think I actually hesitate a lot of times to use the word productivity because I have no desire to turn you into a productivity robot. In fact, a lot of the time, I'm suggesting to you things that you might want to let go of in life in order to be more productive. I think in our society, it's not so much that our productivity that we're not being productive. It's more that we are overloading ourselves with things that are keeping our productivity diminished. Or maybe we're working in a way that isn't in sync with our humanity. I was an anthropology student in undergrad. And so a lot of my thinking is influenced by how we're designed as animals. Like, for instance, you wouldn't take a nocturnal animal and try to make it stay up during the day and expect it to function well. You wouldn't feed a horse steaks and expect their health to stay at the level of a traditionally healthy horse. You wouldn't take a dolphin out of the ocean and say, run, because they're just not designed for that. And as human animals, we are designed in specific ways. And so a lot of times I'm just reminding people, like, hey, you're not a machine, you're a human animal. And today's topic is very much aligned with that. Now, if you're watching me live, feel free to comment in the chat. I will see those questions and I will answer them to the best of my ability. And if you're looking at this recording or this podcast, this will go up as the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. I believe this will be episode 125, available wherever you get your podcasts. But a lot of the times, I'm just reminding people, like, hey, you're a human, and this is how we're designed to function best. And today's topic is very aligned with that. So if you are curious about me, I have written or co-written 4 books, all in the brain science-based productivity, time management, life design area. If you feel like, wow, this all sounds great, Allegra, but I don't have any time, I got you. Check out 3, 2, 1 done. 3 simple steps to get your to-do list done. This will help you gain time. If you feel like, okay, I'm good on time, but I feel like I'm not putting myself first, I gotcha. Rock your morning. This is all about creating a morning ritual in order to take care of yourself. The reason why I'm able to show up as my best self in all areas of my life is because I am hydrated. I have taken the time to do my skincare routine. I've gotten in some movement. And by front loading my day with it, it really sets the tone. So those are my 2 books that I recommend people start out with. And for more about what I do and to find out all about me, you can check out my website, bywdreams.com. That stands for Beyond Your Wildest Dreams, because I have found that when I harness the power of planning, I am able to live a life beyond my wildest dreams. I I do more things and am fulfilled in more ways than I ever thought possible, and that's because I pay attention to what I need and I make time for what's important. You will never see me at the bars. I just don't go to bars. In fact, I rarely eat out even because it's just not my priority. Now, my family does eat out occasionally. We have, a few of our favorite places where we like to go to celebrate, but to keep my health, because you just don't know what you're eating a lot of times when you eat out. Like, I love a spinach dip, but I can't eat it every day and expect my health to be where I want it to be. So most days I am eating kale and chia smoothies and things like that. Anyway, so you will not find me in the bars. You will rarely find me in the restaurants. You might find me in comedy clubs because I do love comedy. I do stand up comedy and I love attending stand up comedy. But I prioritize things, and that's how I'm able to do multiple things that feed me in different ways. By the way, I think a lot of us would probably enjoy doing more things than we do now because our society has become hyper specialized. But I believe we all have the thing that we're called to do professionally and then the thing that we're called to do creatively. I believe we all have at least one in each area. And I do think that a lot of us would be happier if we were giving as much time or giving more time to the creative thing that might be calling you. Anyway, just a random thought there. Mm. So I always start my podcast with pulling a card from this little deck here. I never know what it's going to say, but it always seems to say just what I need to hear. So let's see what it says. Never let yesterday use up today. Never let yesterday use up today. Richard Nelson. I'm also always amazed at all the names that I have no idea who Richard Nelson is. Never let yesterday use up today. So I think what Richard Nelson is saying here is to not dwell on your mistakes. We all make mistakes. And the word mistake actually has a lot of negative charge, negative connotation to it. So how about we don't use the word mistake? How about we just use the fact that every day things happen that maybe we'd like to do differently. And what Richard Nelson is saying is don't dwell on those things that you would do differently. Just do them differently. So let's say you had an interaction with a coworker yesterday that did not go the way you wanted. I actually often like to reenact in my mind the things that I would have liked to do differently to kind of prime my brain. Like, if this sort of situation comes up again, here is how I would like to handle it. So feel free to take that time to productively imagine how you would like it to go and then do that thing, right? So maybe you had a negative interaction with a coworker. And so today you purposefully seek out that coworker. And maybe you even say something like, hey, yesterday I said that I didn't care who took the Acme log account. But upon further reflection, I realize that I do feel like I'm the one who has put in the time to talk to this client, to bring this client in, to negotiate with this client. And therefore, I think I am the one who should be leading this case. So instead of dwelling and negatively replaying it, because when you do that, you're actually not just thinking about it, you're reliving it. You're re-releasing all the chemicals in your body that were associated with that event. And you're kind of digging a deeper trench, if you will, in your brain about this negative experience. Instead, use it as a teaching lesson. Like, for instance, if you were learning math And you learned that 5 minus 3 equals 2, but you had put 1 on the test, you wouldn't go back and rethink 5 minus 3 equals 1. 5 minus 3 equals 1. I can't believe I thought 5 minus 3 equals 1. I can't believe it. Why did I think 5 minus 3 equals 1? You would not do that. You just wouldn't. You'd say 5 minus 3 equals 2. Right. 5 minus 3 equals 2. I need to remember that. 5 minus 3 equals 2. You would focus on the correct answer. It's the same thing. Don't replay that negative thing that happened. Instead, think about how you would handle that differently in the future, because that is going to, one, prime your brain, and two, that's going to flood your body with the positive chemicals. Our brains are so powerful. When we imagine things, we are essentially doing them. Like, there is a lot of brain science on visualization for athletes and how the same muscles twitch when they imagine themselves running that 50-meter sprint. So don't relive yesterday. Instead, use it as a teaching moment for today. Thank you, Richard Nelson. I love that. Okay, so today we're going to talk about what's the ideal amount of time to focus on something. And that question gets us into this topic of ultradian rhythms. So, as I mentioned at the top of this broadcast, an ultradian rhythm is a rhythm that happens multiple times throughout the day, shorter than 24 hours. Now, it's interesting because the science behind ultradian rhythms began, in my understanding, with sleep cycles. When you go to sleep, we have multiple stages of sleep, and these stages cycle over and over again every 90 minutes ish. Essentially, it's interesting because sometimes some people talk about 3 stages of sleep and some people talk about 4 stages of sleep, because the first stage is the one where you fall asleep. But that stage is super, super short. And then each of the stages after that lasts approximately 30 minutes. And the key is, I think one of the most interesting thing about the sleep cycle is that when you wake up after the first 30-minute stage or after the third 30-minute stage, you are well rested. It's when you wake up during that second 30-minute stage that you wake up groggy. So this is why you either want to nap for 30 minutes or for 90 minutes, because if you nap for 60 minutes, you're going to wake up groggy. So there's a little tip there. So we have this ultradian rhythm of these 30-minute cycles within a larger 90-minute cycle that keep continuing over and over and over all night long. So some productivity experts have taken this into the rest of the day and said that 90 to 120 minutes, so an hour and a half to 2 hours, is the ideal amount of time to focus on something because of ultradian rhythms. I agree that we all have attention spans. I have not seen a lot of science on these attention spans of 90 to 120 minutes. I feel like the best advice I've heard with regards to figuring out what your ultradian rhythm is to just pay attention. When do you start losing focus after working on something? When do you start maybe yawning? Your mind starts wandering. Is it after 60 minutes? Is it after 100 minutes? Is it after 2 hours? We're all going to be a little bit different, right? It's not like there's a little timer that goes off inside of us and says, done, I am done. But you do hear ultradian rhythm, 90 minutes productivity. You do hear that phrase thrown together a lot. What I would say is experiment for yourself. Notice how long you can work on something and it keep your attention. When I'm working on something that is like more of a slog, so let's just say taxes. Does anyone enjoy doing their taxes? Probably not. So when I am putting stuff together for the accountant during tax season, I block out an hour to work on it. And it takes me a few days of these 1 hour blocks, because after an hour, I'm just done. I just don't want to look at it anymore. And at that point, it's just not productive because I'm thinking, God, I don't want to be doing this. God, I don't want to be doing this. God, I don't want. And that is so not productive. Do you find yourself doing that? Do you find yourself working on something and you're able to power through for 45, 60, maybe even a full hour and a half, but then you're done? That is your ultradian rhythm speaking to you. And what's the best thing to do when that time is up? Take a break. This is one of the most challenging things. This comes up time and time again when I'm talking to people about how they're in back to back to back meetings. That's just a recipe for low productivity because your brain needs to relax. It needs to process. It needs to kind of in the subconscious you need to allow your subconscious to kind of work on it in the background, because your subconscious always comes up with the best solutions or a faster way to do something. But it can only do this if you allow it the time to process. So don't just rest because you need a break. Rest because this is when your subconscious is working on things. I don't want to say never, but I almost never come up with solutions to problems I'm having by sitting down and hammering away at something. The way I come up with solutions, like such as what will be the next topic of my book, I don't look at it head on. I will maybe do some research, look at, some titles that are related to subjects that I've already written. I will brainstorm some ideas, and then I won't think about it. And at some point, my brain will say, hey, you should write about that. And it's always like of course, that's what I should do. That's exactly what I should do. So, by the way, I'm just remembering, because I've been off for a couple weeks on vacation and traveling. I'm just remembering that I had started a new thing where I was talking in advance to let you know about what my future topics would be on the podcast. And so, just so you know, next week's podcast, I'm planting a little seed here, will be about coming up with a fun and manageable holiday plan. So I'll mention that again at the end. I've written a book on how to rock your holidays. And the whole point of rocking your holidays is to make sure that you are not just celebrating, but that you're actually having fun. Okay, so I will talk about that next week, and I'll mention that again at the end of the show. But yeah, your subconscious brain is so powerful. It makes connections that you just wouldn't make consciously, because it's pulling from all of this information that you have in your brain that you are unable to access. This is why having a writing practice is so valuable, in my opinion. I have a writing practice. I've talked about it. I answer one question a day in this 500 writing prompts book. And the reason why your brain has information in it that you don't know how to access is because you don't always know what question to ask your brain. And we don't always recognize the answers that our brain gives us. So you know so much more than you're aware of. And this is where having a writing practice is so helpful, because this book or any sort of writing prompt service that you want to use, there are lots of sign up for a writing prompt a day. It's going to ask you questions that you haven't thought of. And when those questions come to you, we all interpret the questions differently. But we interpret it in a way that is meaningful to whatever we're going through right now. Because whatever we're going through right now is always kind of in our background of our brain unconsciously. And so when you get this impetus of this question that is asking you something that you never would have asked yourself, your brain is like, "Oh, this is what I think." And so you come up with solutions to things you've been noodling over that you never would have thought of because the prompts help to direct what you are searching for, the answers you're searching for in your brain. So, this is why it's so important to take breaks. So, yes, work for 45 minutes, 60 minutes, an hour and a half, whatever feels like an amount of time that you are paying attention and not wandering off. And then take a break. Some people say 5 to 10 minutes. I don't think that's enough, honestly. I think you need 20 to 30 minutes to rest, relax, to just be. Some of the most productive people in our society actually schedule time, like some super high achieving people schedule time to gaze out the window because they know that the answers are all in here. But you have to be in a reflective mood. And by the way, for those listening on the podcast, when I say all the answers are in here, I'm pointing at my head. The answers are all up in here, but you have to be quiet and reflective and open to the answers coming forward in order for you to hear them. So Ultradian Rhythms, 90 to 120 minutes for most of us. Now, I do want to add a huge caveat to Ultradian Rhythms, and that is flow. We all know what flow is. Hopefully, we've all experienced flow, but just to define it a little bit, flow is when you enter a work state where you are just, it is joyful work. You are surfing the wave of creativity, and time seems to fly, but also stand still, and you are just fully engaged. Flow hijacks ultradian rhythms. When I am in flow, I can work on something for hours. I've gone as long as 5 hours working on something when I'm in flow. And I'm sure you've experienced it as well. Flow is different for all of us. The thing that triggers flow is different for all of us. I cannot listen to music while I am working because I find it distracting. But I knew people who needed music in order to concentrate. I cannot be in a public space when I'm working. I mean, I can do it if I have to, like in an airport or whatever, but I don't choose. Like, I was never that student who chose to go to the library to study because that didn't increase my focus, right? We all have our little things. Maybe those help you get into flow. For me, the thing that gets me into flow is working on words. I just love words. They just tickle my brain in a way that allows me to just work and work and work. And the funny thing is it almost doesn't matter what I'm working on. It could be a PowerPoint presentation, it could be a joke, it could be my books. Fortunately, I have a lot of words in my life, and that's not a mistake. That is by design because that is the thing that excites me. So when you can find the trigger that helps you get into flow, ultradian rhythms almost don't matter. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing because I have pushed flow to my own breaking point. The first time I wrote a book, I wrote for, it's been a long time now. I wrote for at least 10 days straight, maybe longer, where I was averaging like, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And a lot of these hours were nighttime hours because my kiddo was young. So it was like 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. That was a crazy experience. It was my wake-up call to words as my entry point to flow. It was like the universe was saying, "You don't seem to be noticing this thing, so I'm gonna make it really obvious to you." And I remember I was writing and I'm typing at my keyboard. For those of you listening, I am, mimicking typing, and my eyes are like barely awake because I was so exhausted. I was like, when is this gonna stop? I felt just called to get some stuff down on paper. And it was something that I had been struggling with, a question I'd been struggling with. And so my subconscious was like, I have the answer for you. And here it comes. Get ready. And I just wrote for those 10 days. I don't remember how many words it was, like 30,000 words. I don't know. A lot of words, over 100 pages, 150 pages maybe. And I was just typing, and I could not stop. And then finally, after 10 days, I felt done and I slept. So that's the power of flow. I'm not saying one should do that. And it was interesting because what that experience taught me, I guess it's been about a decade now. What that experience taught me was the power of flow, but also the fact that when you find your entry point to flow, you can get there anytime. I can get into flow anytime because I know, one, that words are my entry point, but two, I trust. I trust that flow is going to rise up and meet me where I'm at, and it never fails. I sit down, I get ready to type, and I just go. So that is the one caveat to Ultradian Rhythms, is that when you get into flow, you are just like, with Ultradian Rhythms, what you always hear people describing is, I'm tired at the end of that Ultradian rhythm. But when you're on flow, the work is energizing. And so it's a self-sustaining process. It's like nuclear fusion. It's the nuclear fusion of work, where it's just like, how am I still going? So what I would suggest to you is find how you can get into flow in your everyday life, and you'll be so much more productive. And we all have different ways of getting into flow. There are books on flow. Um, I remember one expert, Diane Allen, explained flow as when you are at the point, and she has a book on flow called Flow, so check out her book, that when you are pushing yourself to a point, uh, challenging yourself in your ability level for whatever it is that interests you. I think that's why I had to take on the challenge of writing a book, because I need to push my ability level. So, check out the books on flow. I do find that there are also these tools that can help get me into flow. Like, for instance, the sound of rain on a wheelbarrow. I have an audio track of that I listen to constantly when I'm like, okay, I'm working on my next book. I put on that soundtrack, and that is very evocative for me. It just kind of takes me, it's like my whole office just kind of drops away, and I am just in my brain space writing. So if you can find tools like that, seek them out. Now I know people say, wow, that's really specific, Allegra. Rain on wheelbarrow. Why is that? I do have a theory behind that. My grandparents' house had a tin roof on part of the house, on the patio area. And when the rain would hit it, it would make this specific sound, and I loved that sound. So I think that the soundtrack takes me back to being in a beloved, safe space unconsciously. So look for those things that you find that you just like. It could be a scent, it could be a sound, it could be a feeling, maybe wrapping yourself up in a certain type of blanket. I do believe that these things can really be amazing access points for you. So anything that feels safe is going to help you let the everyday world go and enter that flow state. So think about those things. So as I mentioned, next week, I'm going to be talking about coming up with your holiday plan. Oh, wait, no. Sorry. That's right. I misspoke. Okay. Next week, I forgot. I was going to have a guest, and the guest rescheduled the date. And that is why this plan has changed. So next week, October 16th, I will be interviewing Mandi Graziano. Hopefully, she's able to make it. And we're going to be talking about Mandi is a sales expert, and she has some really amazing. I saw her speak on networking, and she has some great tips. I believe that planning makes everything easier. She has some tips for when you attend your next networking event, how to plan in advance to network better. It's going to be great. So that'll be that. And then the week after, the 23rd, we're going to talk about the holiday season. So mostly, November, December. If you haven't already, for October, I tell my kiddo she has to decide on a costume, because before October starts, she's kind of throwing out ideas to me. She's already mentioned 3 different costumes that she wants to be. This weekend is the final date for her to decide. After that, there's no changing, because kiddos, they'll change their mind up until the last minute if you let them. So my suggestion to you is that for you to have a stress-free Halloween, tell your kiddo, hey, this weekend is the last weekend for you to decide what costume you want, because then you have 3 weeks to get the costume together. So you don't have to rush around, it's manageable. 3 weeks is manageable. And then on October 23rd, we're going to talk about the holiday planning, how to ensure that you have a holiday, that you bring the magic, but that you also get to experience the magic for yourself. So that's the next 2 weeks. I look forward to seeing you. And remember, planning makes everything easier.